With the animation started, it's time to take care of this pesky elbow. So we're going to look at the simplest solution for doing that, similar to what we have on the wrist here, where that was done just by not drawing the artwork all the way so we get a sense of the joint. But what we can do is use an additional node to make this happen. So I'm going to just expand out my node view here a little bit so I have a little more room to work. And once again, I'm going to add a new node. To add nodes, if we hit return or enter, and we can type what we're looking for what is called auto patch. So if I type in auto, we'll see there it shows up, auto patch. Now, if you're trying to remember what nodes are, we do have the node library, and I can click on that. And we can see we have different nodes there. So favorites would be ones that you can put whatever ones you want into it. So we can see how we have different ones: constraints, controllers, deformations, filtering. These are a lot of the ones that we're using. Auto patch is here. And then we have our color art, our line art. These are common things that we use. Transparency, overlay layer, underlay layer. So there's a lot of different nodes available to you. Just going to go back into our timeline. But auto patch is the one that we're going to use here. So to make this work, I'm going to just select these nodes and pull them up a little bit so I have some more room to work. And with that, what the auto patch does is the auto patch will then say if we have line art of the same color, when it overlaps, we'll make it disappear and we'll let the color art show through. So we create what I like to call an auto patch sandwich. So from the upper arm, I drag to the auto patch, and then I drag that in front of the lower arm. So we're sandwiching the lower arm between the auto patch and the upper arm. And when we do that, you can see how the elbow took care of itself. Now if I were to try it again, we could even see what happens if we do a sandwich with, and if I pull this over so we can better see, a sandwich with the wrist and the hand. So now when I animate, we can see that we have a clean joint. And there are some things that we can do to add some extra artwork in so we get creases at the elbows and wrists, but we're not going to worry about that right now. We're going to just try and keep things a little bit simpler. Now if I were to do that at the shoulder, all of the blue line where it's overlapping would disappear, so that would be problematic. So we don't want to do an auto patch for it. So remember, you're creating an auto patch sandwich. So it goes into our composite. We have to pay attention to the order. So we went hand, lower arm, upper arm, and I've sandwiched the hand between the auto patch and the lower arm. I've sandwiched the lower arm between the auto patch and the upper arm. So when we set it up this way, we've now created a little better looking joint. So now when we bend, okay, that looks painful. Don't want to probably bend the arm that far. But now you can see it works much better and we don't get that. And if I go and start at the beginning, the arm, and because I was doing all those final movements on frame 60, that caused some weirdness. So now we can see how we're able to move it. We're able to have this joint looking better now. It gives us a cleaner looking model, so it doesn't appear as readily that this is cut out or separate layers because we're hiding the joint. but it will be a problem if we were to bend something too far. So it starts, I mean, here it's going to look adequate, but we will run into issues sometimes. Okay, now it's on top, so that's good. That's on top. The whole arm is on top of the body, so we can see all of these layers are on top of the torso and head, so we don't have any issues when we are moving. Oh, don't want to animate that. So here I just selected these two and it looked like I have the correct peg, but looking in my node view I can see I do not. So we do have to be careful when we're doing this. That's what's best, just to click and then you use B or Shift B to work up and down our node chain. So it's working that the arm is, and now if I wanted the hand to be behind the head, this is where we have to build a more complex node structure, and we can start nudging layers in front of and behind, and that's beyond the scope of what we're doing in this simple exercise of animating the arm. We're not creating a super arm or a bulletproof arm. We're just trying to start to understand and get a little bit more familiar working with our different nodes, pegs, pivot points, master nodes where we're tying things together. So this is master for the whole character. This is really the arm master. So it would make sense to rename all of it. So this would be arm master. And this is the lower arm master. So naming our nodes. Now, right now these are more verbose than I would normally use. Trying to do it for explanatory purposes. I would be more inclined to name things a little bit simpler to make it easier and to have my nodes all shorter. But for right now, this is a good way of setting everything up. In this next section on animating a simple arm, what we're going to look at is how to do drawing substitutions, because currently we have a single hand, and what I want to do is have additional hands. So drawing substitutions are really useful for hands if you don't have complex rigged hands, which most of the time drawing substitutions are faster. Once you draw a couple hands, you have all the different views that you need. And we use drawing substitutions sometimes for mouths, for eyes, even feet, depending on the character and the rig. So to create this, what we're doing is going to create an additional drawing for it. Now to see the drawings that are available for a given layer, so I have the hand layer currently selected. I can check in my node view. And one thing that is nice is if you click on something and want to find it in the node view, so if I had my hand selected, we can see there it is in the node view. But if my node view was somewhere over here and I can't see it, if I go into the node window, I hit the letter O, it now centers my node view on that particular node. If I go into my layers and hit the letter O, it opens up all of the layers and it shows me where that layer is. So when I'm in a complex character rig and trying to find something, O is your best friend. You click on something, hit O, you can find the layer, because you may need to animate specifically on that layer and not the whole character. Or if you need to find the node inside the node view so you can figure out how it's all rigged together, that's how you do it. So the letter O. Now, with this hand selected, if I want to add an additional hand, what I can do is I can add an additional drawing. Now, the drawings that we have, I'm going to pull up a new window. So I click on the plus, and we'll see drawing substitutions is available. So I usually keep mine up here. We can see no exposure. So I'm going to actually pull the hand back up here so we can see it. If I were to switch over to no exposure, you would see how now there's no exposure for it, and it's gone. It's here, and then it's gone. And if I want to insert a new drawing, let's hit O, gets me back to that exact part. So I'm just going to turn it back on as if I'd done nothing. So we're here. If I want a new hand, two options. One is I could create an empty drawing. So if I click here, we see we get an empty drawing. It's kind of hard to see what the previous one looked like. So if I turn on onion skinning, and I'll just go back one frame, make the onion skinning one frame long so it's a little bit cleaner so I can see the artwork and I have something to trace. So that would be one way to do it. So now if I grab my pencil tool here, and I can just put in some additional I don't like that line, so let's undo that. Can you continue back from the beginning? So now I've created an additional hand. That's one way to do it. Another way is I can click back there and you'll notice how, well, the hand hasn't changed. So we can just choose which one is being viewed, and I'll go and add in the color art and all of that in a little bit. So if I go back to this hand, or right here, so the hand, beyond doing an empty, I can duplicate it. So now it created a copy of it. So with that, if I grab the cutter, and now I'm just going to select that, hit delete, that goes away. Grab the pencil tool, and that's too far out, don't like that. And you can use either the cutter tool. I'm going to adjust the thumb, so I want to just get rid of the one that's there. So we're now duplicating and adding it. Now, because this was a duplicate, I am going to just grab the color art that was there and delete all of that. So now I'm just back to, need to undo that. Forgot I had the select color art and line art. So now let's go into just the color art, select all of that, delete. So now we just have line art. Okay, so we can see on the drawing substitutions, I have two new hands with that. If I go back to the original hand here, go back to the line art, and I'm going to duplicate it just so I have the guide of what was there to follow here. So now if I wanted to just make a fist, I could do that, but I am able to see. So notice, I can just delete I'm just trying to get a sense of, actually, the blue will give me the guide of what was there, so now I can figure out, get rid of that little pucker that we never liked anyway and should have fixed the first time. So we're creating a hand. I can even go back to the original hand and clean up that line. So now that we have the auto patch joining it. So we have a couple of different hands. Go into my color, get rid of that. I could even at this point, I could take my hand and duplicate it so I have a guide to follow. And my hand could be holding something, so I could even imagine that I can have a hand that is going to be holding. Now that I realize, let's just use the cutter, get rid of all of that, because, oh, wrong layer. I wanted to leave the color and just, because now I have that as a guide. Erase that so we can continue to clean that up. So we can put something in our hand. I'm going to have to clean up some lines there. Oh, get a little right-click action. All right, I'm going to clean up some lines with, oh, try to get the eraser. Let's try again. And then we'll add in a little more detail into it for what I'm trying to do. I'm going to redraw that finger. I'm not happy with that. Now that I can see where that's going, it'll be easier to put that in. So we can add a simple prop to our character's hand so that they're holding a prop. Now go into the color art. Delete that. And now it's just going to require us to do a little bit of coloring. So now that we have these different hands colored, go into the line art, select, create my color art. Let's go under color here. I'll choose my skin color. Oh, don't want to change my line art. Paint bucket. All right, so one hand is colored. Go back to the line art. So it could just be simpler. So we've created the color art. Go to the next hand. Whoop. And looks like, okay, there we go. Turn up onion skinning, we don't need that anymore. That's weird that it chose both, but okay, so now it's selected. Line art. Selected. Create our color art. So now I'll go back to here. We got the skin color active. Paint bucket. Fill, 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 fill. Move to our next. Oh. Forgot to switch over to the color art. And that's where we want to fill, not on the line art. There's our color art. And if we go into the drawing view, it makes it that much more apparent As we can see line art, color art, or see both that way. So if you turn off the eyeball, then you just see the one or the other. So now we go into this view here, color art, and let's zoom out. So if we remember our zoom trick, we're zooming out. That can be really useful while we're working. So now I want just another color. This will be kind of my goldish color for parts on the sword. And just use black that's here for filling that in. Nope, looks like we got a little hole in the finger. Put that there. So I could do a little bit of line cleanup if it was really necessary. And now let's go create a color for the sword blade. We'll just go with 1 for now just to keep things simple since we have some line art to work with. So you can see how it's now there. So now if we go back into our camera view, if we look at, we have the original hand, and now it switches to a new drawing here. I'm going to let that drawing stay up a little bit longer. Right. I'll switch to that. Switch to that. And if you're wondering, is there a quick way to change drawings, we can use the square bracket keys on the keyboard, and that will move us through the different drawings. Now, it's a good idea to have one more additional blank drawing, so I enter in one more blank drawing. And when we're working with our drawings, especially in a complete character rig, we like to name them so that we can work with them. When we do lip syncing, we need to name them as well. So to rename the drawing, we can do it in the timeline. So I can right click on this and go to drawings, and then I have an option to rename drawing. So that way I can rename it. And if I name it 0FF, not OFF, but 0FF, it puts it at the beginning of the list. So it's common to make one of your drawings where it's turned off. That way it's not like no exposure where we get the gap in the timeline. It's better to have where we have it set to off. Or I can just go back to the original hand. And if I want, I can extend out the exposure of that using the plus key. So now we can cycle through our different ways. The other way to rename a drawing is to click on the window here and switch to edit mode. Notice it turned red. When that happens, I can now just right click and choose rename drawing. Notice on Mac it's Command D, on Windows it would be Control D. So I can now, with that, just do Command D. And it says will not update another version of the scene. Yeah, I know. Okay. And now with this, I'll just type in open hand. Command D. We'll say don't show this again anymore. And now this will be spider hand. Commander Control D, victory, vest, and sword. So now that we've renamed those, then we click back here again and edit, remove edit mode, so we're back to our standard mode. So with that, now you can see how we're able to migrate through our different drawings. And just move this over, and now we can play. So that allows for drawing substitutions, so we can change what we're trying to do. So I can bring my arm up and finish. And I just realized that I was thinking about the hand towards me, but really I need a reverse hand if it's going to be the arm on this side of the body. If the torso was in front of it, so this was the opposite hand, this as drawn would work. Because otherwise we have a hand backwards facing out, which is kind of problematic. Good part is we're working with notes. So that is an easy fix. Is if we want the torso on top, so it's on top of the body. Now if we go here, we can see how the hand, now we don't get to see the hole in front of the body there, see the shoulder, but now the hands are the correct options that we need. So that works out okay. Now I could leave it where it was, and we do have an option on it. So if my hand is here, is I can now take these exact same hands, and if I duplicate that hand, so now it's a duplicate version of that hand right here. We're going to go in and work with that hand. So with this, the hand, I need to go back and choose my line color. So that's going to be on top, and then I can just erase these extra lines. I'm going to just draw that a little bit differently. So now we have the basic fist from the opposite angle, which theoretically it's going to work just fine with those lines on top. So now let's go to the open hand. That's fine. For the spider hand, we'll repeat that same process. So with the line art, we can just simply erase out what's there, and then we'll just have to, I think, on this one it looks like we'll have to clean things up a little bit. So knowing that's the case, I'll go into my color art, select it, delete it, go back into the line art, select it, create my color art, go to the color art, and grab a paint bucket and fill. That takes care of, oh, I forgot to duplicate it. So now we just have a back spider hand. Oh well, we get the idea. So let's go to our victory hand here. We'll duplicate that one so we have a second victory hand. And now we go into that second victory hand, and we'll repeat this same looks like we need to clear out the color and redo it. So delete, back to the line art, select, create the color art, click over, and now grab a paint bucket and fill. Zoom out if the fill doesn't work, and then we can zoom in. So zooming in and out can be a faster technique than having to use the stroke to close things off. So that is a nice way of working. So we have the one spider hand, we have the two victories, the two fists, and now we'll go recreate the sword option here on it. So for this one, go over to the color on it, and I think with the color we'll just get rid of all the color, go back to the line art and start doing a little rework action here. Gonna switch back to our line color, of course. So we'll have a hand. So select everything, create the color art, go to the color art layer, grab our paint bucket, zoom out. Okay, so now that filled. Grab the black. Black's been filled, grab the yellow, and finally plug in some gray, get the line art. Alright, so now it's been filled. Go back to our camera view and we can decide which hand we want to use. In that case, I'll switch to that one because that doesn't really make sense to have our backwards. So you can see if we're choosing the wrong one, it makes the arm look really awkward. And with that, the hands are working. We have drawing substitutions taking effect. We've used our line art and color art. We've renamed them. We can go and now rename these as well. So if I go back into edit mode, I can select one, Command or Control D, and this would be front fist. And this right here be front victory. Alright, so now they've been named. Forgot to duplicate the sword and the spider hand, so we only have the one view for it, but such is life. So now I have my different views. I have my different hands that I can work with. I can do my substitutions. I'm animating with my pivot points, adjusting it in the timeline. If I collapse on my master peg, I have more flexibility as to adjusting that speed. If I move that keyframe over, it slows this down and makes that end part happen faster. So I always want to be playing with. Now the cycling of hands is kind of ridiculous there, but hopefully now you kind of understand some of how to work with it if we switch over to our transform tool, so we don't have light table causing all kinds of weirdness. because even when we are selecting different layers with our select tool, if we have light table on, then we see that drawing, but now the auto patch is rendering for the wrist and for the elbow, giving us a much more engaging animated experience. So good luck and have fun.